going on, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, where today I'm joined with Nick Connor. He's a former baseball player here in the state of Utah, which we just made that connection, and he's currently living in Estonia. A little bit more about Nick. Nick has spent a lifetime obsessed with maximizing potential and is giving individuals and organizations an inside look at what it takes to navigate life's tightropes, balancing career ambitions with personal happiness, financial success with inner peace, and personal growth with meaningful relationships. As a proud product of a single mother home, he started from humble beginnings and used what he learned to become a D1 and professional athlete. Top producing sales rep, sought after speaker, best-selling author, award-winning coach, and creator. Most importantly, Nick is a proud father and husband. With no intentions of slowing down, his mission is to dissect common dilemmas faced by high achievers and offer actionable alternatives that don't compromise on success or satisfaction. Guys, we're super appreciative to have Nick speaking with us today. He's actually calling in from Estonia, which we're going to dive into here in just a second. And with that all being said, let's hear from the man himself and jump into today's episode. Nick, welcome to the show.
Love it, man. Love the intro. It sounds a lot like the way I wrote it. So thank you. Thank you for knowing it, my man. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about why you're calling in from Estonia. Right before we actually hit record, everybody who's listening today, he asked me, what do you know about Estonia? I said, rolling hills and castles, and that's about all. So tell us why you're calling from there and what it's like.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll wait for everybody to get off of Google because if they're anything like me, man, they had to Google where in the world is Estonia. That's what I did literally when I met my wife back in 2016 when I met her and she said she was from Estonia. I was like, oh yeah, Estonia. And I had no idea where it was.
No clue, just totally BSing.
Yeah, so I had to walk away and actually Google it. But yeah, man, we met in 2016 at a speaking event in Nashville, Tennessee, and right away knew that she was the one. And we got married about a year later over here, and we've pretty much been here ever since, which wasn't the plan. And which is a good principle maybe for those entrepreneurs out there or want to be entrepreneurs that are gearing up to maybe go on that journey. You can make a plan, but life sure will throw you some curveballs, man. And COVID hit, green card issues. We never planned to be here, but we made the best of it. And that's about as good an entrepreneurial principle I can share, actually.
Yeah, I love that. What was it like during COVID being in Estonia? I'm surprised they didn't kick you out being a foreigner, but I guess you were married there. So what's the citizenship like over there if you marry an Estonian?
Well, it went well to your first question. What was it like during COVID? In the beginning, we felt fortunate because it's such a small country. We were like going to the gym. It was business and life as usual. And then when things were kind of dialing back a little bit in other parts of the world, even in Italy, where it was extreme pretty much the whole time, things got tight here. So another benefit of being an entrepreneur, a remote worker, you can kind of control your destiny. We jumped off. We went to Dubai, where you had some freedoms when they closed everything down here. We were over there. So our life wasn't too interrupted, but nonetheless, man, I mean, COVID was a game changer for everybody. And I think we're just kind of finally starting to see the real impact of that in so many different ways, you know. So, but we were fortunate, definitely. Man. No complaints. COVID didn't really impact us personally or professionally because we're both able to work remotely, and so we weren't impacted that much.
Yeah, I was living in Brazil at the time when COVID hit, and so while I was living down there, they basically said, all right, if you're a foreigner, get out. And so within a week of knowing kind of what was going out, they shipped us all out. So we flew in these massive 747s, just foreigner upon foreigner heading back to our countries. It was a very interesting time, to say the least. So I was wondering if there's any kind of connection with Estonia going on over there.
No, man, we didn't get displaced, but that's wild. I mean, that's a wild story. What an experience that must have been.
It was. And the weird thing about this and that entire interaction too is Brazil at the very beginning of COVID, I don't know if the government was necessarily trying to cheat the system a little bit and just show that Brazil was a safer country than everyone perceived it to be. But obviously Brazil is one of the top biggest countries in the world. And when COVID finally got to the country to spread, and back then, obviously, nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew who it was affecting. We now have the research on who was actually hurting, so people like me would have been just fine down there. But um, the craziness of it was at first Brazil was like, "Oh, we don't even have a single confirmed case. Nobody's gonna get it here. We're in a very safe location." And then within a matter of, like I said, a week, 2 weeks, all of a sudden it explodes and they kick us all out. Crazy experience. Awesome, Nick. So yeah, transitioning back over to kind of your younger childhood days. Like I mentioned in your bio at the very beginning of the episode, you came from a single home with just your mother. Maybe you can give us some background about what that was like growing up, where your father was in this picture, and kind of how it led you to be the triumphant man you are today.
Yeah, man. But I think that it's the norm nowadays for people to have that experience. Pretty much everybody listening probably relates to growing up in a single parent household. So my experience with that was that I didn't know anything different. It was normal for me. I was able to kind of get a lot of the things that I would normally get from a father, a present father, from sports. And so sports was a huge part of my upbringing. Like most young guys, or even young girls at this point. I mean, women's sports is taking off, and that's why I think sports are so important for young people. But for me specifically, sports were always going to be a part of my destiny. My dad was an athlete. My grandpa was an athlete, and they all competed at the college and professional level. So for me, that journey was always going to be a part of my experience. And even though my father wasn't around, we always had that bond with sports. So yeah, man, like my childhood was really good. Like I kind of feel sorry for a lot of kids today growing up who didn't have the opportunity to grow up without social media, without so many of these gaming systems. I mean, the biggest gaming system that I remember, I mean, high school, it was like the first PlayStation. I graduated in 2001, so we never were sitting at home on our computers. Like I never had some of those opportunities, maybe even distractions. So growing up, I was getting my knees dirty, playing sports in the backyard, getting in trouble with my mom because we were coming home too late because the game wasn't over yet. So overall, man, I look at my childhood and think favorably about it. But there were challenges that were presented from my youth that later came up in my adult life. And I think that that's what we all have to kind of face when we get a little bit older. We realize that some damage was done, maybe even some trauma. And if you're brave enough, courageous enough, you'll do the work to overcome that stuff so it doesn't hold you down.
I want to highlight something right there too. What you just said should not go unnoticed. When you were growing up, you didn't have a lot of the constant distractions of social media, scrolling on Instagram, TikTok, finding out, hopping online and playing all the games with your buddies. What you guys did, and I appreciate this, is I look at a lot of my younger nieces and nephews too. They're in that same boat where a lot of times they can kind of choose the easier way of just sitting on their phone or going and playing a game online, or they can go choose what is seemingly now the harder thing in today's society of going outside and playing, going and getting their friends and going and doing something. And this lesson I've had to apply. I've thought about this a lot in the past year. I have a good friend. She's running a challenge for her business. She's calling it Summer Off Socials. She has kind of a digital wellness business. And her big incentive this year was, all right, we're going to delete social media for the entire summer. And I've thought a lot about that. And for work purposes, I stay on social media, but it's helped me kind of sit back and recognize a lot of the times when I'm just sitting there scrolling for no reason whatsoever, just kind of
Yeah.
a mindless activity. And ever since I've kind of been practicing that more mindfulness moment of saying, okay, I'm not going to sit there and scroll. I'm not going to sit there and just kind of turn off my brain and go for it. I'm actually going to do something more meaningful with social media. And if I'm not going to be meaningful, I'm going to set it down. And ever since then, I feel like those moments when I turn off my phone, when I am not so distracted with everything going on, and I sit there and I have a second to, I wouldn't necessarily call it meditation, but just a second to sit there and think. Those are the times when in my business, I come up with the new idea. I come up with the solution. I come up with some kind of workaround that I was struggling with. And I'm sure you can relate to that a lot as well. Playing sports back in college, having these interactions that weren't necessarily instantaneous, where you had the online opportunities, where you had the everything at your disposal. You had to grow up with that. And what have those situations taught you as a business leader these days?
Well, the most important principle that I've learned in, I've been in business for myself for creeping up on a decade now, and I've been a commission worker my entire career. When I got done playing sports at 27, I went and sold security systems door to door, like so many guys do out in Utah. And then after that, I got into sales jobs where I was having to sell something in order to get paid. I never literally worked on a salary in my life. And the motivation to make money is always there. The desire to make money is always there. And that makes it really tempting to take shortcuts. And the biggest lesson that I've learned from all of that applies to the danger of social media, and specifically the access you have to comparing your journey and your process to other people's. Is that you typically are comparing yourself to somebody's step 3, step 4, step 5, maybe even step 10. And so you feel like you should be somewhere that you're not, and therefore you need to get to where they're at faster, when in reality, you're maybe even ahead of where they were at your step. You know, your step 1 might be the equivalent of their step 3, but you're comparing yourself to their step 10. And so the temptation with social media is to skip steps, to not really be present with where you're at, overcome the challenges that you have in the moment, to be present and in the moment and not distracted and have your energy diverted. So these are some of the dangers, I think, of or temptations of social media, or just the world that we live in now. You know, it's there's so much value, man, in paying your dues, in putting in the work, putting in the time, and building a really strong foundation, not only for your life or your business, but just in general of anything that you decide to commit to. You know, build a really strong foundation based on principles and based on the fundamentals of success. And of course, you know that I'm a big believer that that starts with you as the person, as much as it does your skill set in your business or in your career.
Let's go back to that concept you just brought up. I'm a big fan of this phrase as well. Pay your dues. What does that mean to you, and how have you applied that into your business life?
Well, I learned this in sports. You know, nothing's promised, and you're only as good in baseball as your last at bat. Baseball was my sport. You know, it's a sport where if you're, you know, 3 out of 10 puts you in the Hall of Fame. You know, so you're going to fail, and each at bat you have to earn it. And so I brought that into the business world, and getting into sales, you learn that lesson. I mean, you're going to have to get a lot of no's before you get a yes. You're going to get some doors slammed in your face. You're going to get rejected. And so paying your dues is really just about earning it, and understanding that earning it requires pain, rejection, failure. And more so as I've gotten a little bit older and built an actual business that didn't just require me to kind of be knocking on doors or prospecting the whole time, you realize that paying your dues then becomes sticking to the boring, mundane tasks that a lot of people think that they'll grow out of or graduate out of. But sustaining success once you've had it is actually the game. You know, learning how to keep your money once you've proven you can make money at a certain point becomes the game. And you understand that when you've gone through the steps. So that's a part of paying dues as well, is just going through the steps. And I think a big part of the distractions that a lot of entrepreneurs make is they're trying to solve problems that they're just not quite ready for. You know, like, you don't need to be thinking about tax strategies if you haven't made your first 100,000. You know, you don't get ahead of yourself. You know, that's a part of paying dues as well, is dealing with the problem that you're faced with right now that's standing in the way of you taking the next step in your life or your business. And then once you get past that step, there's going to be an entirely new problem that gets exposed. And if you can be disciplined enough to act from that principle, then you'll grow, and you'll sustain growth over time.
Let's go back to your door-to-door days. For many of the audience, they know I actually sold door-to-door for a while too. I sold door-to-door too. I know the pain. Yeah. I sold out in Tennessee one year. I sold out in Florida, and it's a very tough industry. A lot of constant rejection, a lot of, like you said, doors slammed in your face. A lot of good principles to be learned, though. And I'm sure that's kind of what got you started in the business world, especially into the sales world. And as we all know, if you are trying to operate a business, if you cannot sell your product or your service, you don't have a business. So tell us a little bit about what that taught you.
Well, before I do, I'm curious, what did you sell?
So I was in the pest control game. I wasn't alarms like you. I had family who did alarms for quite some time. I was raised in California, and I never knew this was some kind of industry. When you're little and somebody knocks on your door, I had no idea what was going on. I thought it was either the Mormons or the Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on
That's
my
right.
door. So then when I get to Utah, I had a bunch of friends who were doing this, and I was looking for a nice job, and they said it paid well, and it surely did. And so when I went out and worked on it, it was a very new experience. I had my only intro to the sales world was back in high school. I started a little landscaping business with my friend. And so we'd go door to door, and it was a lot easier of a pitch back then because we were young and people respected us and just wanted to help a couple high school students. Our sales pitch was absolutely awful. We'd knock on the door and say, "Hey, my name's Brandon. This is Dawson. Can we cut your grass?" We way undercharged our services. But it was a great learning opportunity, and it propelled me a little bit in door to door and kind of where we're at in business today. But yeah, tell us about your experience and how that kind of shaped you up a little bit.
My first year was brutal because imagine one summer you're pursuing your dream, you're playing professional sports, and you're a bit of a celebrity, even though you're not really making any money. And
Mm-hmm.
in my case, I was on my way out. I only played one season of professional ball.
Were you
But
in like AAA or
so the equivalent of double A.
okay?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, you're pursuing your dream, and there's some glamour and some status and some recognition that comes along with that. And then the very next summer, you're getting doors slammed in your face in the heat of the Virginia sun, dealing with military people that have been commuting hours to get back to their house to find me sitting at their dinner table with their wife trying to sell them a $600 contract or a $3,000 contract for a year for security. So it was tough, but I did well enough that I decided to come back for the second year and made a little bit of money and blew it as fast as I made it, but learned some lessons from that. And overall, I wouldn't trade that experience for the world now. And in fact, most of the successful people that you've listened to on podcasts, that you read their books, maybe admire them. If you ask, most of them have done door to door sales. So
Mm.
if you're young and you're around that college age, it's a great thing to do. In fact, funny story, out here in Estonia, one of the most common things that Estonian college kids do is they go to the US to sell books door to door for a company called Southwestern Advantage. So they sell children's educational books door to door, which happens to be what my wife did for 6 summers, and she was an absolute beast. She still holds the record for most units sold in a summer, and she was a legend. There still is a legend in the door to door game. But I've met a few kids over here at the gym and encouraged them to go out and do summer sales, and a couple of them have actually gone. So hey, if you're listening and you want to break into entrepreneurship, door to door sales, number one, is a great way to do it. But just know that it's going to challenge you more than anything. But it's the thing that you will never look back on and be like, oh, I regret that.
Oh, definitely. And the interesting thing about it too is last summer, that was the last summer I sold door to door. My wife and I had just gotten married. We literally got married. We started driving so we got married. We went to a hotel that night and we slept pretty close to where we got married. And then the next day, we started driving to Florida to go out and sell. And it was kind of like an instant, like, boom, we're hitting these life events. We're gonna hit some of these goals. And despite like the challenges that we face, because it's long work hours, like you said, we're in the heat from our morning meetings were at 9 o'clock, and then we'd be knocking till around 9 p.m., 9:30 p.m. Got an hour drive home. So a lot of these days I was seeing my wife for maybe an hour and a half, depending on how late we stayed up. We'd eat dinner at 10, 11 p.m. at night. We'd go to bed and wake up. We'd have 30 minutes together while I woke up, and then we'd go and keep working again. So like you said, very, very challenging. But to any of those young entrepreneurs out there, those young hustlers who are trying to figure out what the heck they want to do with their life, it
Yeah.
is an amazing stepping stone, a guide that you can kind of share to figure out where you want to go in life. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you also learned that you do not want to stick inside of that world for very long because it is brutal.
Well, you're still married, right?
Yeah.
Same. Okay, so you survived it. Yeah, it wasn't for me, and I just needed 2 summers to learn that. And I took away lessons that I still use today. So it was worth it. I mean, even 1 summer is enough to get the lessons. But
Mm.
those skill sets, everything that you said there, being away from your wife, putting first things first in terms of, hey, this is a season where we're sacrificing time together for a greater purpose. And in this case, it's 3 months in the summer to go and sell and make money. And those are skill sets that'll serve you well in your marriage. So good for you, man. That's that's a cool story. I appreciate you sharing it. And I'm sure the audience is now like, I wonder about this door-to-door sales thing. Maybe it'll be worth it.
Yeah. If anybody has questions, like I said, no longer in the space, but I got plenty of friends and family who are. So if you have any questions, as always, you can message me in the comments down below of today's episode description. But Nick, I want to keep this conversation focused more on you. We've been talking about the door-to-door game. We've been talking about baseball, which I haven't even mentioned this to you yet. That is my ultimate love. It's my favorite pastime. Watch the Dodgers every single night. Break my heart sometimes, but I still fall back to them every single day. Let's hear a little bit more about your business currently, where you're at with it, and how you got into it to start.
So when I was transitioning, I kind of felt like my life was at ground zero. 27 years old. Most of my friends were getting married, already had their degree. I had my degree, I guess, but I certainly didn't know who I was going to marry. I didn't own a home yet, and some of these things my friends had already done. So I felt I was behind the 8 ball. And didn't really know the direction I wanted to go personally, but I had an opportunity to speak in front of a group of athletes at a company called D1 Sports Training, where I was working at the time. And some of your listeners may have heard of it. Really cool company, sports performance company. And I don't know what it was about speaking. I stood up in front of the audience and I was like, this is amazing. I really enjoy this. How can I turn this into a way to make money? And pretty soon thereafter, as fate would have it, I got an Inc. magazine subscription from this girl I was dating. And I read this article about this program called Youth Speaker University. And it was the first time I discovered that you can get paid to speak, share your message on stage. And so that's how I was kind of introduced to the world of speaking, and that kind of led to being introduced to the world of coaching, and all of that. Pursuing all of those things kind of led me into the world of, online marketing, and which wasn't really even that big of a thing back then. And so that's how it all started. But today, man, my main business is one-on-one coaching. I work with founders of startups, primarily investors, but most of these guys are family guys, and they're experiencing some breakdown, whether it's financially, with their health, with their relationships. And they've had success, right? They've kind of reached the mountaintop of success. They've made good money. They've got investments. They've got the house, maybe even a second house. Most of them are putting their kids through private school. They've got a Rolex, but they're unhappy. They're unfulfilled. And oftentimes they haven't done some of the inner work. They're really detached spiritually from their faith, if they have one at all. And these are all things that I get to help them do, man. I love the work that I get to do in that way. Most of the work I do, man, is personal development more than professional development. But every one of the guys I work with are business owners and leaders. And so inevitably I ended up helping them with business stuff as well. But I like to think that more of what I'm helping them be is better men and better husbands and better fathers, better leaders.
Definitely. And what's interesting about the audience who listens to the Get Over Yourself podcast, we have business owners who have already surpassed millions of dollars in revenue, millions of dollars in ARR. And then we also have the young startup. We have the person who frankly doesn't know what the heck they want to do. Maybe they just graduated high school and they're looking for some kind of journey to go on. They know they want to do something in the business world. One kind of thing that I've noticed in a trend early in my life was you have these successful businessmen and women who sit back and tell you, I wish if I could go tell my younger self, I worked really hard. I made something that I'm really passionate about. But at the end of the day, I focus too much on the money. And it sounds like you have that issue with a lot of your clients that you try and resolve is, hey, yes, you may be financially successful, but are you successful in your spiritual relationship with God and your relationship with your wife or your children or your husband? Are you successful in your own health? Did you work all these years and now you have terrible health and you don't feel good 24/7? So for those listeners out there who are surpassing these millions of dollars in revenue, they already kind of have the established business. What's your advice for them? And then more importantly, for everyone who's just getting started in their journey, what's your advice to them where, yeah, sure, I can listen to the people. Oh, you may have regretted working a little bit harder in these areas and not so much in your relationships, but you're just saying that because you already have the success, you already have the money. What's your advice to them?
Well, why don't we just speak to both at the same time? Because I think that we, at both stages, we suffer from the same temptation. And the same temptation we touched on it earlier is to not dial in the foundational principles that lead overall to success, happiness, fulfillment, and sustaining those things over the course of a lifetime. And so I'm a big believer in who, not how. And I know we're going to get into this in a minute, but many of the issues that more successful guys are facing at their stage than the newer guys revolve around character issues, character flaws. And let's just call those character flaws the choices that they've made. Some have made a few poor choices that they regret or that they feel shame around or that they would go back and change. And some have just accumulated more of those choices. But in the beginning, and let's call it closer to the end of our life, we've all accumulated these choices that we feel lower level energetic states about, right? So if you Google the energy frequency chart, the lower level energies that we get into are shame, guilt, resentment, even desire. And most people spend their lives in those lower level energetic states because of their decisions, their choices. And that is something we all can relate to, whether we're beginning or we're in the end. And so an easy question to ask yourself is, how do I feel most days? Our feelings are not a bad thing, but most guys don't know how to deal with their emotions. They respond or react to their emotions, and that gets them into problems. That perpetuates the low energetic states. A lot of guys just don't want to deal with their emotions. And this is something that I see a lot of my successful guys do. They would rather avoid it by sedation, distraction, and that can encompass any amount of things. Use your imagination, how you could distract yourself out of feeling the way you feel, how you can try to sedate yourself out of the way that you want to feel. And that's something that a lifetime of avoidance leads to. And so that's where I meet a lot of the guys that I work with, and they want a better way. And so I say to them the same thing I say to the younger guys: get great at understanding your emotions and being intelligent with your emotions so that you don't react and respond to them, but you can use them to make better choices, make better decisions. And ultimately, that's how you sustain success in any area of your life: relationships, finances, friendships, anything. Yeah, man. Character work is the most important work you can do on your business, on your finances, any area of your life.
You know what your story just reminded me of? I don't know if you've ever heard this analogy before. Super powerful one. It's about the bison. And when a storm is rolling in, and if you guys can kind of picture this, if you picture a big bison, you might picture Yellowstone and the ones you see on the side of the road there. Whenever a massive storm is rolling in, a lot of animals, and you can relate this to your own life. When a storm is rolling in, what do us as humans or animals tend to do? We run away from it. We try and find a spot to hide. We try and go into a cave or a safe shelter, and we hide there until the storm rolls over. My favorite example, though, are these bison. They walk towards the storm. So if you picture big, you see all the clouds, the dark clouds, the lightning, the thunder cracking. As we might cower away from this theoretical storm, the bison walk straight into it and they take it head on. Because in theory, if you can let it pass over you and you move towards the storm, it's going to pass over you quicker because you headed into it and it's heading your direction to begin with. And I really appreciate what you just mentioned there, Nick, because a lot of times inside of our lives, we have these coping mechanisms. We have these things that distract us from the reality of the situation. If we can just sit back and say, you know what? I'm not going to sit there and drink my problems away. I'm not going to sit there and watch porn to solve all my issues. I'm not going to sit back and blame all my problems in life to somebody else's doings. I'm going to face that challenge and walk into the storm head on. I feel like a lot of our life's problems, whether that be in our personal life, our business life, our spiritual life, all of them, they all connect and they all can push us forward to where we want to be.
Yeah. Great example of the buffalo. Matter of fact, I love that so much. That's why I have a picture of a buffalo on my phone as my screensaver for that exact story. A weathered, battered, bruised old buffalo in Yellowstone in the winter, which is brutal. And this guy's just facing it down. And I keep this on my phone to remind me of that exact example. Because look, I tried that path. I tried the avoidance path. I tried the go out and get bottle service every night and hook up with hot chicks and try to live that professional athlete lifestyle. And frankly, it very quickly proved to be super unfulfilling. And I felt this disconnect. And if you can understand what I mean by the disconnect and the misalignment in your life, maybe you're at a point in your life where you get that because you've lived enough life to understand what it feels like to be out of character. You're making decisions and you know they're not good decisions. And maybe you've felt the way that feels when you continue to do that over and over again, how confronting that can be. If you've reached a point where you understand that, great. If you don't, then this is a great thing for you to be aware of. You're going to feel misalignment when your behavior is out of alignment with your character, or let's call it your conscience, that voice inside your head. For me and my faith, that's the authentic voice of God. That's the Holy Spirit prompting me to walk closer into who I've been called to be by my Heavenly Father, right? Whatever you call him, that voice is going to speak to you and it's going to tell you, hey man, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make you feel good. This isn't right. And the sooner you start to be aware of these misalignments, the quicker that you can make some adjustments. And the best that we can ever hope to do is to not get rid of poor decisions, but it's to be able to make a course correction sooner instead of a week, a month, a year of repeating behaviors that make us feel bad, resentment, guilt, shame. We can start to course correct day by day, maybe even hour by hour, minute by minute. And the best that we can hope to get to, I believe, is to be able to just compartmentalize our decisions day by day. Certainly have a plan, have a vision. But if you can day by day look at yesterday and say, okay, here's where I fell off. I'm just going to not do that today. I'm going to pass that test today that I failed yesterday. You're going to be in good shape. You're going to be in good shape. And that doesn't matter if you're a millionaire or if you're new. If your life is not where you want it to be in any area of your life, you choose, stick with that day by day. Don't fail the test today that you did yesterday. And you'll be in good shape. You'll start to make progress.
That's perfect. Well, Nick, I appreciate everything you just mentioned there. To close out, I want to hear how people can actually reach out to you if they have any questions, where they can follow you on social media. Once again, guys, as Nick tells us this, it'll always be in the episode description down below if you want to go check out his pages. And then, Nick, if you could close out with that as well as your final piece of advice.
Yeah, I always say it's great to go follow and support the podcast that you're listening to. So if you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe because that helps the podcast in this episode. But also it reinforces that you're a person that takes action. And if you can give yourself that evidence by any time you consume something on social media, a podcast, a video that you like, don't be a spectator. Don't just consume on these platforms. Take an action step. That could be as simple as commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing, anything. And if you want to go to my Instagram profile and give me a follow, that's great. But the bigger thing that I want to say is don't sit on the sidelines. When something inspires you, if something confronts you and you have a question, take action. Not because we need it. His podcast is going to do great. Brandon's doing amazing things. My business is well established. But for you, give yourself that evidence that you're a person that doesn't just consume, that you take this information and you do something with it. And that's going to build your self-confidence. That's going to build your fortitude, your resilience, all those things that you need and that you're learning by listening to this podcast. So take some action after listening to this today.
That's awesome. Thank you, Nick. Guys, once again, all of Nick's socials and everything else will be linked in the episode description. Take the action like he just advised. Make sure you're not sitting on the sidelines and you continue to go throughout your journey in the direction you want to be headed. You don't have to sit back anymore and say, I don't know why it's not happening to me. I don't know why I'm so sad. I don't know why life is throwing all these curveballs at me. You can take action and start swinging at them today. Nick, once again, thanks for joining us. Everybody, if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to share it with somebody who you think would benefit from hearing today's words spoken. And with that all being said, we'll see you guys next week.